Hi everyone, this is Selvi. Today's interview question is splitting user story. Scenario is development effort or the development work is very minimum when compared to the testing work. That is the scenario. So first let's try to understand why we will go for splitting up of an user story, and let's try to understand our scenario and then we get into our solution. The first thing is, what is a user story? User story should deliver a value and it should have some logical outcome. That is how user story should be. And when this user story, when we say it is done, that means if we deploy this piece of work, what we have completed in the user story, if we deploy it in the production, it should work comfortably without any kind of issues. That is how a user story should be. So now we know what is a user story. And why splitting of user story is required? Splitting of user story is required when in certain situations where the user story is very big and we cannot even estimate it, or it is having too many goals associated, too many things we are trying to achieve in the story, then we try to split it up. So when we are unable to estimate also, we can split the user story. When we have too many things associated in a single user story also, we can split the user story. So these are certain situations where we will go for splitting up of user story. Now, today our question is very simple. The development work is very minimum when compared to the testing work. That is the situation. Now let's try to understand this situation with an example, then we will get into the answer. Let's take a simple web application. This simple web application has already a functionality for search. Now there is a requirement that we need to add from and to date time pickers in the search functionality. Implementation wise it looks very simple, but the catch here is with the testing. The reason is already this application, this web application is being used by different users in different operating systems in different browsers. Basically, this web application supports different browsers in different operating system in different browser versions also. So now, how are we going to test in all these flavors? Until and unless we say that I have completely tested everything, we cannot go for live. We cannot deploy it in the production environment. Now, how to manage this situation? Managing this situation is very simple. Now we understood the problem statement. Our development effort or work is very minimum when compared to the testing work. Now we cannot club this in one single story because this story cannot be estimated. It may go beyond 21 story points also because it has too many things to test, but development wise it is very simple. Now how to split this user story? Okay. Now let's get into the practical scenario what we will try out in this kind of situation. Let's take the first story where we will be implementing. That means where we will be developing this date time picker related work in the search functionality. So development is done. The next thing is we are going to ensure that we have prepared a sanity test suite. What is a sanity test suite? Sanity test suite means, see, whenever we are implementing a functionality, what we generally need to do? We need to do two things. One is testing that functionality what we have implemented, and the second one is the regression testing. What is regression testing mean? Regression testing means if I introduce some new functionality, whether this new functionality addition is creating any kind of side effect in the existing functionality or not. We need to test that. But every time whenever we are making a small functionality change, can I test the whole application? No, we cannot do that because we may not have that much time. Of course, if there is already an automation system available in the project, then it is well and good. We can use the automation test suite to manage this. But if it is a new project where automation is also not yet stabilized, then we will be having tough time to manage this. So what we will be doing, we will always prepare something called a sanity test suite. So sanity test suite means what we will be doing, we will ensure when there is a functionality change that is happening, first we will do something called as impact analysis and the study. So this functionality, when we are adding, what is the impact it is going to bring for other existing functionalities, or what are the things that I need to concentrate in the testing so that I can ensure that this functionality have not created any additional side effects. How can I ensure? So that is called as impact analysis. So we will do the impact analysis and we will find what are the areas that we need to test in addition to this newly added functionality, what are the areas where it will create an impact which needs to be tested, plus the sanity test suite, which means it will cover the basic functionalities and it will cover only the core functionalities. It will not go in detail. It will be a very, very high level testing which will cover the core functionalities and ensure that they are working or not. Now, considering all these things, we will write in the acceptance criteria in testing scope. Development scope is very clear. Datetime picker addition in the search functionality which is existing. What is the testing scope? Testing scope is do the impact additional functionality that got added, which is the datetime picker that should be tested, plus the sanity test suite, plus the impacted areas alone we will be testing. So for this, what we will be doing, this alone we will highlight. And while highlighting, we will take the next step. So this is one option. First option is doing all these things and prepare what is the testing scope. And add it as part of your user story so that tester knows that this is only focus I need to do. Now comes the second option, that is the important option. What is the primarily used operating system and the browser? Why it is required? Of course, tester cannot test on everything, right? Even though we captured impacted areas and what is the sanity test suite, in addition to that, can we test on all the operating system and all the browsers and all the browser versions in one user story? Highly impossible. Now what we are doing is like the splitting is going to happen based on which is the primarily used browser with the operating system. So now from our user data, because the application as it is already used by different users, from the usage point of view, we gathered that many of our users are using Mac OS and they are using Safari browser. So now product owner mentioned this also in the user story, saying that this story is dedicated for Mac OS Safari browser version so and so. So now this particular story scope is very well defined. What is the scope? First, developer will develop all the things related to the datetime picker implementation, everything. And now tester will be concentrating on the impacted areas, the sanity test suite, that means the core functionalities, and the actual functionality which got added, that is the datetime picker, in only Mac OS Safari browser. Okay, Selvi, this story is done. But what will happen? There are users who are using Chrome. What is the surety that whether it will work in Chrome or not, whether it will work in Windows OS or not? Yes. So next story we will create on that. What we will be creating? The same impact analysis, the same points we will write, same sanity test suite we will write, and what we will be writing? The functionality what needs to be tested, that acceptance criteria is also available. The focus here is for Windows operating system, Chrome, Microsoft Edge, and Firefox. Even still we can split it in a way like for every operating system there can be one story, or for every browser also we can create one story. It depends on how much we want to really split it up. We can split it up in that fashion. But shall we generally say that we should not create user stories for testing, we should not create user stories for development? Now you are contradicting that. Very good question, very valid point. Always, why we say we should not create for testing, we should not create for development? Because let's say I am only creating a user story for development. I'm not even testing. Next user story I'll create for testing. What is the disadvantage? The first user story, when I say it is done, what is actually done? It is not completely even done. When I say done, that means I can deploy this particular piece into the production environment. It should comfortably work. But here, without testing, how can I move it to the production environment? That means it is not a logical outcome. It is just a placeholder we created and did the work. That's what it means. Similarly, if only testing there is a user story, what is the outcome? What is the outcome of this? Only the test report and the test validation, whatever the bugs or the defects that we have identified, that is the outcome? No. Generally, we should develop, we should test, we should add documentation. Every work stream that is required to provide the value, that should be merged in a user story. That's how a user story should be constructed. We should not construct based on different work streams like documentation one story, testing one story, design one story. No, it's not the right way. But here, we cannot club everything in single user story because the testing effort is so huge. But here also, when we are splitting as per what we have discussed now, like what we have discussed, first identify what are the things that we need to test. What are the things? Impacted areas, the actual functionality, and the sanity test suite. These things we need to test. First user story, we are targeting the most used operating system with the browser, that is Mac OS and Safari browser. This means what is the value that this story is bringing? That date time picker with from and to fields in the search functionality. We can deploy it in the production environment that will support Mac OS and Safari browser. We are delivering a value. It will still work. It is not like a half-cooked item. It still works because the reason is we have tested that in one of the browsers. That is our major targeted browser by our users. Now next story, what is our value? The value is the same datetime picker should work comfortably in search criteria, in search functionality for Windows operating system in Chrome browser. So here the next value we are delivering. We are extending this functionality for the users who are using Windows Chrome. So this is the value. So every user story, it should not be a placeholder. It should actually give a logical outcome and it should deliver a value. Here, every story is delivering a value such that we are able to expand the functionality that gets used in different operating systems with different browsers. That is our whole target. As we were unable to gather everything in one story because the testing effort is very huge, we created a model by splitting this user story in such a way that we ensured every user story has a logical outcome and delivering a value, and we have splitted it in that fashion. I think this is one of the very interesting practical scenario that most of you would have already faced, or maybe you may be facing when you have such environment where you have a story where you need to have the development effort which is very minimum, or the development effort or the work is very minimum, and testing effort is or the work is very huge. So in certain situations, we should not just create like, okay, let's plan for development in one sprint, testing in one sprint. No, first development and testing. On what logic we are making this Safari and Mac OS, that also should have some logic, and that should come from product owner. Product owner should know which is the first target for me, which is the first OS and first browser I need to target, just to ensure that this functionality is working fine and it is also going to reach many users. And next, step by step, pick up the things in a way that is based on the priority. I think this would have explained a very important practical scenario on splitting of the user stories. We will definitely cover different scenarios that practically we face in our projects and during our execution. So we will try to understand much more scenarios that will really help us. And I think this episode would have helped many of you in understanding how to split the user story. Thanks everyone for listening. Happy learning and stay tuned.